welcome back to Racing Rundown here on YouTube. I'm Eric DeCoster, and welcome back to another Kentucky Derby contender profile here on the channel. This is my first one that's going to be put out on Practical Move. We'll, of course, spend a good 10 minutes or so on and look at his career, but as always, really excited to be doing these. This is usually my favorite thing we do each and every year leading up to the big race. I feel like we do a really good job here, me and Jack, on laying out who the best horses are and finding, more importantly, what to notice from the non-logical contenders. Last year, of course, Jack nailed Rich Strike nearly to a T. He didn't say he was going to win, but he said he was going to at least hit the board, and boy, that's exactly what he did 2 years ago. We laid out some good things on Medina Spirit. Once again, neither of us gave enough of a credence to go out and pick him, but we felt like we provided information, and most importantly, got great feedback from all the listeners saying that what we were saying helped them land some bets, and I think that's really what this is all about for us, is to help you guys. That is the end game for us, not to give you our opinions and feel better about ourselves, but to give you guys some insight in what's good and what's bad and everything in between about every Kentucky Derby contender. So let's get on to Practical Move. The West Coast best chance at a Derby winner this year is one of the few representatives from the West Coast to begin with, as we'll kind of touch on in a few minutes, but trained by Tim Yakteen, ridden by Ramon Vasquez, as has been the case for his last three races. And obviously, Tim Yakteen will probably be a story again this year because he is taking at least one runner for Bob Baffert in Reincarnate. But this is his own horse. He has been the trainer of this horse for every single start in his career, worked him up. It took him 5 starts to get his first career win. He did technically break his maiden career start number 3, but he crossed the wire second. But his first time crossing the wire first came in the Los Alfuturity, a grade 2 in December, and that's really what elevated him to the next level and carried him on to where he's at now. So obviously a horse who's on the improve, but one thing about him that's really been impressive, and then we'll start there in the pros, is that he's unbeaten around 2 turns. That's something that clearly is what works for him. His 3 worst losses were all sprints, and they were to Cave Rock, National Treasure, and Having a Meltdown, 3 of Bob Baffert's best from the crop. Obviously none in the Kentucky Derby, but they all flashed a lot of ability at different points in their careers. Practical Move in his 3rd career start got that win via disqualification, but when he really got to stretch out to a mile and a 16th and then a mile and an 8th is where he started to show his true colors. That win in the Los Alfuturity, and the San Felipe, and then the Santa Anita Derby last time out was a huge effort and has propelled him to where he is now and being a legitimate Derby contender. And I think after the Los Alfuturity, there were a lot of questions. And he didn't beat a great field. The horses behind him do not seem to be true graded stakes quality in this crop, yet he was able to back it up with a win in the San Felipe against 8 other horses, many of which are okay, and then did the same in the Santa Anita Derby. Sure, he beat kind of the same horses in there, with the exception of Mandarin Hero, but nevertheless did it impressively. And when you look at it, that's obviously a 3-race win streak, unbeaten around 2 turns, but where he's also taken a step forward is on the buyers. You see that level and that pattern of improvement that he has displayed throughout his career. Went from an 88 to end his year, which obviously showed a lot from those 5 starts, and then both of these numbers this year are hundreds, and that's easily the best in this Derby field. When it comes to buyers, sure, you have hundreds here and there from some horses, but no one has put together 2 consecutive leading into the final race. Not even likely favorite Forte or a horse like Angelo Empire or Tapit Trice. Those very logical contenders. Of course, the 2 Japanese horses we don't have numbers on, but I would guess neither of them would have thrown 100 pluses in their most 2 recent starts. So that's a big bonus if you're a believer in that. Now, I know there's people who don't believe the California figures are always true to form. I even tend to fall in that category most of the time, but I think it's telling that Practical Move has shown this kind of improvement, given he wasn't throwing those big numbers to begin his career. And most other metrics will also back that up. They'll also say that he has improved and he's been good this year. One that doesn't, though, is Brisnet. He's actually gotten worse with every start on Brisnet since the Los Alamitos Futurity. He ran a 105 in that race, a 102 in the San Felipe, and then 100 in the Santa Anita Derby. So that is definitely something to take into consideration. Moving on to those cons, he has beaten little to no Derby starters. Skinner could very well make his way into the field, whether that's as an also eligible or as one of the last few in, depending on when you're listening to this. But that's it. That's it. That's the only horse he beat in the San Felipe, and that's the only horse he beat in the Santa Anita Derby. There is very little West Coast representation in this year's Kentucky Derby field. His stablemate Reincarnate did most of his final prep work in Arkansas, Wild on Ice comes in from New Mexico, so no overlapping form. And then we have Skinner and then potentially Mandarin Hero, who really needs a lot of help if he wants to make his way into the Derby starting gate via defection. So that's a tricky aspect. How much has he really been beating? And how does that also reflect on his Santa Anita Derby? Because it was his weakest performance of this year, of his 3-race win streak. It was the weakest. Maybe not by Beyer, maybe not by time form. Time form actually loved the race, but Brisbane did not. And he only won by a nose. And that's a little bit concerning. Now, going to the dynamics of that race, he did get a little aggressive on the backside and was fighting Ramon Vasquez. Kind of something he showed in the San Felipe as well. He sat this really perfect trip in both, sitting right behind the leader in a pocket, exposed when it mattered, and ran very nicely. And he got through in the Santa Anita Derby on the rail. It's really the ideal trip to win a Kentucky Derby, is to be able to sit the trip that he sat, especially in this year's Derby. I feel like that'll be a recurring theme that me and Jack have, is the pace scenario looks pretty muddy in terms of having a lot of forward speed in this race. And if you can sit that perfect stalking trip within 2 to 3 lengths of the lead, that could be the gold spot. Practical Move does really fit that bill, but he wasn't able to put away Mandarin Hero and Skinner. Now, here's the other thing. The pace was pretty fast in there. If you look at it, it went 46-1 for the half, and it slowed it down a little bit for the 3/4, but nevertheless, still pretty hot. So with Mandarin Hero and Skinner both making the last runs, it was one of those races where that last run was going to be the most beneficial. So perhaps holding on reflects positively on Practical Move. I'm kind of in between on it. I thought it was impressive, but you would like to see a horse win by a little bit more in their final Derby prep. So that's kind of the biggest knock on him. He didn't really bury that field that he should have in the Santa Anita Derby, especially given neither of the horses who ran well in addition to him are in the Kentucky Derby as I record this. Once again, things could very well have changed in the 2 weeks up to the Derby, but a horse with a lot of talent. And the final con on him is the training schedule has been inconsistent. Now, you could look at that as a positive as well, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But throughout the winter, of course, you follow racing on a day-to-day basis. You know, Santa Anita's had to cancel or delay training hours or things of that matter because of rain. Just been, week after week, it seems they're hit with some heavy storms that cause their track to be closed down in the mornings or canceled in the afternoons even. While that necessarily didn't affect Practical Move, the morning aspect definitely didn't. Of course, they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is protect our equine athletes. And if they don't feel the surface will be consistent with rain, they don't let them train. And that's good, but that could leave your horses a touch unfit heading into some big races. And that very well could have also been the case in the Santa Anita Derby, which is why I say it could be a positive, because perhaps he could have won by more if he was given greater opportunity to work up to that race. Now, since the Santa Anita Derby, the weather's been more so better, and that means he's been able to train a little bit more consistently. So I don't know if it'll entirely be a factor, but it's something we really won't ever have an answer on, but it is something to note. Do you believe the inconsistent training schedule could have hurt his overall development up to the spot, or do you think it'll improve him, given he's been able to be on a consistent pattern ever since the Santa Anita Derby? I side with the latter because I don't think his last prep was what it should have been if he wanted to fully elevate himself to top tier in this Kentucky Derby, but I could also hear the case otherwise. This is a really talented racehorse, but he does have some glaring cons in addition to his pros. I mean, he's a winning machine, but who are you winning against? You're throwing the best Beyers, but those are disagreed on in some other areas, and that depends how much you really believe in Beyers in general, and of course, the figures that come out of California year after year. We saw last year what happened with Messier and Taba, both faltering pretty badly despite throwing lofty numbers. So once again, a talented horse, but a horse that you have to weigh a lot with, and maybe the price won't be there come Derby Day. That's all I have for you all here on Practical Move. We'll see you next time here on Racing Rundown.